Okay, Ramla, good to see you.
Good to see you.
You've got 3 minutes, dear.
Okay, well, thank you for the opportunity. So I want to kind of speak to a little bit about the storage. 90 days isn't sufficient time, I don't think, to keep a video recording and then to delete it. A lot of limited English proficient clients that we see and residents that we work with may not even know like a crime has occurred against them or their civil liberties have been, violated or whatever. And so this all comes out through community meetings or, folks coming up to a person like me in the community and they're like, hey, listen, this happened. And I'm like, well, did you file a complaint? And an example of that to show you is one of the mothers recently told me, a few months ago actually, she told me that her son was driving a silver Honda Accord, brand new, and they got stopped for a taillight being out. But that's impossible since it's a brand new car. And so then they proceeded to stop at a red zone. The cop questioned them, got them out of the car. I think that car was searched because the question was, are you on parole or probation? Nothing was found, and so then they were proceeded to be given a citation for parking in that red zone. Now, that was a little, for me, it was kind of surprising to hear that someone would stop for an officer, and when nothing occurred or no wrongdoing was found, that they would then be cited in that way. And so that didn't come to light. I don't think that happened when she told me. This happened months before. So in instances like that, it's important to know what's going on and to have the record. And so 90 days I don't think is sufficient. So I hope that we could rethink that a little bit. And 1 year may not even be sufficient if it's an even more serious case or issue. So
Thank you very much, Ramla. Kathy and Mendonca, you're going to have to tell me how to pronounce your name. I've done it 3 different ways now this evening.
Mendonca.
Mendonca. Thank you.
Well, first I have a concern with, I just want to make sure that I understand this correctly. The same officer who was wearing the body camera is downloading the same equipment to upload it to evidence.com? Or is this a separate, is this another individual? Am I allowed to ask that question?
Can I answer that?
Jot down the question and we'll come back to the panel with an answer for you.
Okay. I have several questions and comments. I'm not fully satisfied with body-worn cameras. I do see a lot of loopholes as far as victims' rights, as far as the capability of turning it on and off, as far as something escalating from let's say a routine an officer would approach somebody and it doesn't involve a traffic stop or pedestrian stop, and they don't turn it on, and something happens. What I do like to encourage for the public is that you do have a right to tape the police, to video the police. Do it at a reasonable distance, preferably 15 to 20 feet. You're practicing your amendment right. As long as you just keep it simple, you're there to support the person that is whatever potential stop or whatever brutality that you're trying to prevent or misconduct. Keep the responses simple. Say that you're not interfering, you're just observing. It is really important that citizens practice their right, because it is their right. The police department are public servants, and we pay taxes, and I would like to encourage citizens to have their own recording of those incidents. And for more information on practicing your rights to record police, go to the ACLU website. I'm part of a group that practices Know Your Rights trainings, and I think that's important for more people to step up and support your community members that way. So,
thank you very much. Next up, Michelle Krug.
Community members, when we come to this podium, we need to bring facts because they bring facts. We can't come to this podium with perceptions and not the facts. One thing that I do want to say is that it is a fact that racism exists in the department and outside in the community. We all carry biases. As far as the cameras, my concern is that we're investing in the police department for things like cameras, it may be needed. I need to really look at that. I think that the intent is to make sure that the officers are doing what they're supposed to and to have evidence of that. But I also think that the city and the police are failing to bring intervention. You have, again, and I will keep talking about it, one intervention officer in the gang unit for over 100 gangs and over 7,500 gang members. Intervention has to be a piece in what you bring to the communities, especially districts 4, 8, and 9 that are the most vulnerable, that show in your data there is racial profiling and there is violence and there are other things. We as community members need to make those calls and write down the information so that we can provide it at meetings like this of reality, what it is to us. Yesterday I went to a Los Angeles gang conference, and there they said that data is a moral issue. It shows a criminal hologram, but lacks to show the conditions of the people. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Kellen Ruscinello? Kellen, here he comes. And you've got 3 minutes, sir.
Good evening. Hello, my name is Kellen Ruscinello. I'm a staff attorney with the ACLU. On-officer cameras can be a win-win, but only if they are deployed within a framework of strong policies to ensure they protect the public without becoming yet another system for routine surveillance of the public. Without such a framework, we cannot support the deployment of body-worn cameras by the San Diego Police Department. Based on the summary sheet, the ACLU has several concerns about the SDPD's draft policies on body-worn cameras, particularly that, quote, officers are advised to tell citizens that they are recording when asked. Private citizens do not have a reasonable expectation of privacy when talking with police officers during the scope of an officer's official duties, even when that contact is in a private residence, end quote. The purpose of body-worn cameras is accountability, not covert surveillance, especially people's own homes. Unannounced recording by officers does not advance public trust. It turns officers into walking surveillance cameras. Failing to advise individuals that they are being recorded also misses an opportunity to encourage all parties to be on their best behavior. In our letter to the committee, the ACLU has made suggestions on how to accomplish this notification. We also have transparency concerns with this process. It is troubling that the department would request committee approval for a contract to purchase body-worn cameras when neither the City Council nor the public has seen draft policies on how these cameras would be deployed, and particularly when the SDPD's own policy summary suggests individual privacy is not given proper protections. Thank you.
Yes, my name is Cecile. I'm a member of Fed Up San Diego. San Diego's against police sexual misconduct, and appreciate the opportunity to speak. I had to step outside the first time I was called. My concern about the body cameras is what, I guess sort of actually piggybacks really well on what the gentleman who just spoke was saying, which is that I think that there needs to be clearly written policy of consequences for officers who are repeatedly found to be neglecting to turn on the body cameras during stops. Because my concern would be that an officer who knows that they are going to be engaging in illegal, inappropriate behavior or behavior that violates a person's civil rights would simply choose not to turn on their camera before engaging in that activity, and they'll be able to say later that, oops, I forgot this one time to turn on my camera. And I think there needs to be very specific consequences for that sort of thing if a complaint is filed. On the topic of complaints, it was brought up earlier for people in San Diego, for citizens to bring complaints when they feel that they're being racially profiled against. And I just want to echo what people were saying earlier, that we need to stop saying that there's a perception of racial profiling. I live in City Heights, and the only time I am ever bothered by police as a white woman is if I'm with a person of color, and that is because of racial profiling. And people in the community know this, and I think the statistics that have been revealed today prove it. So I think that we need to stop pretending that racial profiling is not a thing, and now we need to start talking about what are we going to do with the complaints. If people come forward and say, I've been racially profiled, I was thrown on the ground for no reason, I wasn't doing anything wrong, and so forth, which we know is happening every day, there was so much testimony today that accounts for that, then what are we going to do about it when it is reported? How is the process going to be transparent? I have a friend who was actually thrown on the ground by a San Diego police officer. That police officer had recognized him from Occupy, had a bone to pick, because this person had been an activist with Occupy San Diego, exercising his supposedly, protected free speech, First Amendment rights. And that officer said, "You just spit on the sidewalk, I need to talk to you." In fact, he had not spit on the sidewalk. To make a long story short, he was arrested for no reason. He called to file a complaint, spoke for a full hour with the person he thought he was supposed to be filing a complaint with. At the end of the call, at the end of the hour, this person says, "I feel the need to tell you that I'm actually was the supervisor on duty when that arrest happened," which made the report completely invalid, and obviously had a conflict of interest because he was the supervisor of the incident. So there's a clear lack of accountability with this issue of reporting. There needs to be much better accountability, and there also needs to be transparency. And I think also, I just want to echo what people have been saying about this being an issue of systemic change. So you can't just talk about, it's good that we're actually having honest, reporting of statistics on what is, racial profiling in San Diego.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, but just to end my sentence, so the question now becomes an issue of actually retraining the officers to not see people of color as automatically criminal, because that's why they're stopping them. And if you say that we don't tolerate racial profiling in San Diego, then that means you're calling people of color criminals.
I appreciate your time. Let me just launch into it. A couple of questions here
address some of the questions. There's going to be very clear guidelines. One that is, no, it has to be on. As we said, this is the policy here. It has to be on all enforcement contacts and everything that we just went through. And what we're finding, remember, we're testing this. And the testing is going extremely well. And after about a couple weeks of training, that it became second nature to that. And what the officers are telling us is that they want the cameras on. Because what we had heard is that not only does it hold the officer accountable, it holds also what's going on with the public. And actually what they've said is that one of the speakers had spoken to this, is that in some of the police departments that have deployed the body-worn cameras, complaints against officers have dropped in some cases more than 80%. So our officer said after about the first couple weeks or so, when it became second nature to turn it on, hasn't been any issues. And if an officer deliberately doesn't turn it on, then yes, they will be disciplined.
And you have a way of tracking that by the...
Because of the metadata and everything else that we can take a look at it next.
Okay. And then, what is an enforcement action with regard to a pedestrian? What would qualify as an enforcement action?
Well, if the officer stops somebody with the intention of investigating a crime, trying to find if the person's committed a crime, that's an enforcement action. Anything higher than that's an enforcement action. So a detention is an enforcement action. Handcuffing and pat-down is an enforcement. Connecting a pat-down would be an enforcement action.
How about stopping a person saying, "Hey, I've got a couple of questions for you"? Would that be an enforcement action?
If and there's going to be some gray area here, because we do want some natural conversation to take place without being recorded, or people just will feel uncomfortable to approach officers. If the purpose of the officer's stop is investigatory, with the idea of investigating that person for committing a crime, trying to develop reasonable suspicion, or actually using their authority to detain that person, then that is an enforcement-related content.
And then expectation of privacy. I know California has very strict laws when it comes to private parties recording other parties. How does that apply to the police department? Do you feel does the law, would the law say that you need to let somebody know that I'm wearing a camera and it's on, to eliminate that expectation of privacy?
In general, the law says that if a police officer is conducting business and they have a right to be in that place, then they have a right to record. And that's kind of the default law regarding that particular issue.
Could you see a value in telling somebody, oh, by the way, we're recording?
There is a value sometimes, and there isn't other times. And sometimes it's I think that there will be some officer's discretion, and sometimes it's helpful, calming. Sometimes the officer will say that because they want the person to realize, hey, I'm recording you. Mm-hmm. Just understand that I'm recording you. If somebody asks, our policy does say that if somebody asks, that the officer will tell them to record.
Absolutely. You'd have to do that, right? I know that Ramla came and asked that 90 days just doesn't seem sufficient to save this tape. Your comment to that? I know that you were
Well,
talking
the,
90 days to a year.
It's a balancing act. Let me just read something real quick. This is from the ACLU who shared this in October, wrote this in October. It says, regarding retention, it says, data should be retained no longer than necessary for the purpose for which it was collected. For the vast majority of police encounters with the public, there is no reason to preserve video evidence, and those recordings, therefore, should be deleted relatively quickly. That's from the ACLU in October. There is a balancing act between how long we want to record things that's not evidentiary, it's not linked to a crime. If we stop somebody who's maybe had too much to drink in the gas lamp, and 6 months later the person's running for office, you know, the ACLU has some rightful concerns based on what we've seen around the country that does this video suddenly pop up on YouTube regarding this candidate? And those are some of the other side, that's the other side of the coin there. So that the retention schedule is not set in stone, I can tell you that. But there are two sides of that issue, and we're doing our best to try and find a balance between individuals' privacy and keeping recordings long enough to fill an accountability need and an investigative need and a protective need for the officer as well.
Sure, and of course, if this tape is used in a court, a public court of law, it winds up becoming sort of out there in the public domain anyway.
That's true.
Right. You were talking about recordings flagged for retention, something about 5 years according to state law. What was that?
Well, the law regarding citizen complaint investigations is that the cases are retained for 5 years, and that those particular files are retained for that period of time. So if somebody files a complaint, it becomes an investigation, then that becomes part of that case file, and that's where that law applies in those circumstances.
Okay, thank you very much. And turn now to other members of the committee. Thank you for your indulgence. Ms. Cole, do you have any questions?
Thank you. First of all, I want to say that I truly support the cameras because I really believe that it's going to not only protect the officers, but it's going to protect the public. So I appreciate that. You've had a pilot program going on for a while now. Could you tell me what you've learned from the pilot program thus far?
Yes, and what we're going to talk about too at the next item, we're going to talk about some of the challenges with the infrastructure, and Mario Ciro is here, and we're going to talk about that. But what we have learned, is what I said, is that it took a couple weeks for the officers to feel comfortable with the turning it on, turning it off, that it became second nature of that. At first, some of the officers were skeptical as to what this was going to be, but after they've had it now for a while, that, as I said earlier, is that they want to put it on. Because it not only protects them, but it also is accountability for themselves too. And so the testing is going very, very well, and I would say that we are meet and confer with the Police Officers Association, and we're very close to finalizing the final policy.
Great, thank you, Chief. And I do also have a concern about the Citizens Review Board. And Chair, would it be